Hi everybody, welcome back. Today I'm going to be working on All Hallows Eve, the full-size bars. I'm not going to be showing the minis because the minis really aren't worth showing. They're very simple to make. You just pour them into a mold and then I pipe them with glow-in-the-dark details later, but maybe I'll show the piping, but honestly it's a one-step pour. It's pretty simple. But the full-size bars are really complicated, so I'm going to show you how those get done. Full-size bars of All Hallows Eve get started with this little orange lid. This lid came from the top of a container of cocktail umbrellas, those little paper umbrellas you put in your drinks. This is the cap to that container, and it's just the right size for this. So in this container, it's already heated up. It's actually a little cool. I have a mixture of what is mostly ultra clear, mixed with some pearl white mica, a tiny bit of white-based soap, and a few scoops of glow-in-the-dark powder. The reason why you don't use straight white is because this way you get the sort of translucent pearly glow rather than a flat white, which is sort of more spooky and moon-like. But this is what it looks like, and it really will glow in the dark. This is a little bit cool. I would have preferred to have poured it a little hotter, but it'll be fine. And I'm just going to pour it to the top. I only have one of these molds, so this initial step takes a little bit of time. I just leave this alone. It takes about half an hour or so to cool down enough to pull it out of the mold, and because it's a flexible plastic, with a little tab, it's really not that hard to get out. Once it's out, I test it with UV light to make sure that it actually will glow. And I'll show you that. But right now we're just going to let this sit. And I have to make 8 of these in total. I already have 2, I think. I think I made 2 or 3. I'm going to make 8 of these because I'm going to make a double batch of these for Murder of Crows. And we'll come back as soon as this is done. Alright everyone, back again. Going to just take this out. And you can see it just peels away because it's a sort of flexible plastic. And that's it. And I'm just going to show you what it looks like under a black light. And I check it with the black light to make sure that it actually will glow. And you can see it takes a while for the black light to fade. It's just too bright in here to test it with a regular light, but you can see that it definitely will glow. And that's pretty much it for these moons. I just have to make a whole bunch of them, so I'm going to make a whole bunch of them off camera, and then I will move on to the next step. Alright everyone, on to the next step here of making All Hallows Eve full-size soaps. I've already done 3 of these in advance, but while I was off camera I poured 4 of these little black flats. They are just glycerin soap mixed with activated charcoal to give them this color. And I pour them in a thin layer into the mold and then release them once they've hardened up. The reason that I use these is because this is a way for me to conveniently measure what will fit in the mold. Since this is exactly the shape of the bar, anything that I cut out of this shape will definitively fit into the mold when I place it back in without having to measure or worry or create any kind of additional molding. All of the little graveyard scenes for All Hallows Eve full-size bars are cut by hand. They're all different. I've done 3 of them here, as you can see. In the end, I'm going to do 8 for Murder of Crows, because it being like the Halloween, the gothy Halloween soap, it'll probably do pretty well. And each one is completely different. There's no real pattern to them, except that I put in 3 little tombstones, whatever they look like, and 2 trees. Everything else is sort of up to however it comes out. I'm just going to show one as quickly as I can. Normally I do this at my desk because I have better lighting and a better position to cut in, but there's a movie going on in the other room, so I can't do that right now, and I'm going to do it here instead. So all I do is, you have to cut on the side that you're actually going to present, because as you're cutting through, the X-Acto blade won't stay straight, and so they don't look nearly as nice from the back. They just have a more choppy appearance. So it's easier if you just cut from the front, although I know that intuitively it seems like you'd want to cut from the back to get a neater result. In this case, that's not what happens. So I'm going to get down real low. I'm not sure if you're going to see my head or not. I'm hoping not. And I'm just going to sketch out a quick design for this bar. And as I said, there's no particular plan for these. Sometimes I do them wacky like Tim Burton spirals. Sometimes I do them kind of quickly with, kind of straight and very basic shapes. It's just a matter of how they just come out. It's just one of those things. They're all unique. The reason why I don't have these molded into a fixed shape is exactly this reason, is that these are just designed to be different. They're kind of little scenes unto themselves, and I sort of like the fact that they're all different. I know that it would be faster for me if I just did them in a mold and I could pour them all and make them exactly the same, but in this particular case, I like the idea that they're all different, that they're all part of their own, they're telling their own story, this their own little tale that they're doing. So it's easier to cut these out if you just cut out the flash, the excess in pieces, and I just throw that back in the pot. And I need to throw that back in the pot because we are by no means done with this. Each of the full-size bars actually takes 2 of those black flats to make, so any excess that you can get out of the process goes right back into the pot to get poured into the second round of flats, because that's how we carve the bats out. Unfortunately, the pieces that you get out of this process are generally not really large enough to effectively cut out the bats. If you try to cut them out of pieces that are too small, you lose control of the X-Acto, and they wind up getting screwed up and breaking as you're trying to pull them out of the mold. So it's just easier to do it in stages. You get a more consistent final result out of it rather than fighting with these things for the next 2 hours. But once you, like all of the soaps that have embedded pieces, once the embedded pieces are done, that's really the hard part. Once all the embedded stuff is done, it goes pretty quickly after that. But this is still the part that takes time, and because these are all done by hand, they take a little bit more time than other things. But this is why All Hallows Eve is a limited edition, because they just are. It's not that they're not fun to make or anything. They're nice, and they're a nice little artistic project, but they do take time. And so I try to limit how much time I'm being asked to devote to them. I also tend to only do them for charity. The Murder of Crows ones won't be, but they will be back as a charity promotion for Bat World in October, throughout the month of October for Halloween. Bat World is a registered charity in Texas, and they do wonderful work helping all kinds of bats and rehabilitating them and giving injured ones safe places to live out their lives, and they're just a really wonderful organization, and Amanda works her ass off with them. Alright, so I have all 4 of these, and I now have this pot of sort of excess little bits lying around. And I want to say that these little bits are kind of lightly scented, because this is the same pot that I use to pour the minis, but I don't add any extra scent to them. So it doesn't really affect the scent profile. I still have to scent all the rest of the soap. So I'm going to leave these alone. I'm going to pour another set of 4 flats and then come back and show how you do the bats. Okay, so while I was off camera, I cut 3 sets of bats to go with 3 of the 4 flats cemetery scenes that we have here. As I said before, you rarely get a large enough piece out of the cemetery to cut the bats properly. I know that they're not that big, but if you try to do it on too small a piece, it just doesn't work. So the bats, as you can see, are pretty abstract. I mean, they're not really all that. They're just little squiggles mostly that kind of most resemble bats, and we know what they are because it's a cultural thing. I mean, we see them in a cemetery, we know that they're bats. It's just too small to get a lot of detail out of them, so don't make yourself crazy, but you need two. And I just sketched them out roughly, like this. And then what I usually do is cut the piece out that it's coming from and work with a smaller piece, because it's easier to get little pieces shaved away than to try to push it out of the whole piece itself. And you just carefully cut it out, and you can take all of the excess and just toss it right back into the pot and use it again. So each one of these gets 2 bats. I'm just going to cut this one out. And once you have the bats and the cemetery scenes, those are all of the, and the moons. We do the moons first. Those are all the embedded pieces that you need to make All Hallows Eve. But because I'm making these in bulk, I still have another 4 cemetery scenes and another 8 bats after I do these two to create, in order to make 8 full-size bars. So all of my moons are done. Don't worry about that one curling under, I'll fix it in just a sec. And there we go. Okay, and then just sort of straighten that out. Again, it's just an abstract little squiggle that kind of gives the hint of it being a bat, and I'll show you why you don't use the back side. The back side just has no resemblance to kind of anything. It just sort of looks like a, like a complete mess. So you just do it from the front, and that's it. So, see, they're really tiny. They're kind of hard to manipulate. So once you have 2 for each one of the cemeteries that you're doing, and you've got your moons ready, then you are all set to go. So I still have quite a few of these left to do. I'm going to cut the other bat for this cemetery off camera, and I'm going to do the other 4 cemeteries and the other 4 bats, and then I'll come back for the next step. While I'm waiting for some more black flats to set up so I can continue to create these All Hallows Eve pieces, I'm going to show the filling process for the minis. I didn't show the pouring process because there's really not much to show. It's just the same. It is fragrance, but it's glycerin soap mixed with activated charcoal, and you just pour it into a mold and you just wait, and this is how it comes out. I'm using my injector and the same mixture that I used for the moons, which is a mixture of clear glycerin soap, some pearl essence mica, a tiny bit of white, and some glow-in-the-dark powder. And I'm not really trying, I'm trying to be neat, but the truth is that there's only so neat you can be. These channels are pretty narrow, and it's going to just need trimming no matter what you do. So you just move as quickly as you realistically can with this, and fill them up with the mixture, the glow-in-the-dark mixture. It doesn't matter if it runs over the side. You can clean them up later. Just try to be as neat as possible, just to save yourself work on the back end, but you're going to wind up needing to trim them no matter what. And as soon as you get them all done, you just need to let them sit for a few minutes. It doesn't really take very long before you clean them up with the sculpting tool. I've already filled the first 8 of these. This is the second set of 8, the last set that I have to make for Murder of Crows. And as soon as these are done and set up, I will do all of the final cleanup on all of them and show that. The other thing that it's important to know about the glow-in-the-dark mixture is you have to keep it stirred. The glow powder is heavier than everything else that's in it, and it will sink to the bottom if you don't keep it thoroughly mixed. So just if you use glow powder in your own projects or whatever, just be aware that it's going to want to separate and sink to the bottom, and you're going to have to do a lot of stirring to make sure that it stays in suspension and you get a good glow out of it. That's why I always check the glow with a black light before I continue on anything that has glow powder in it, because it's just going to need a little bit more stirring in order to make sure that it glows brightly. Okay, so that's it, and as soon as these are done and set up, I will show you. Alright everyone, so I have 2 of these bats that I did yesterday, and they're fully set up. They set up in just a few minutes, and I'm just using a sculpting tool to gently take away the excess. And you can just dump the excess back in the pot, really, as long as you don't press too hard so you're scooping up a lot of the black colored soap with it. If you do it gently and take a little bit of time, you can just reuse this, no problem. When you're doing these little fangs and the eyes, you have to be really careful to be gentle, because they'll want to pull out like a little plug. You want to be careful that you're just gently scraping away the parts you don't want. Don't press too hard. Just let the tool do the work. I'm sure that you've heard that phrase in other contexts. And just gently take away the parts that you don't want from the piping on the bat wings. This is really all there is to doing these. The minis are, by comparison, like just no effort at all compared to the way the full-size bars are. The full-size bars are what take time. The minis are pretty easy. So this one's done, and that's really all it takes. And if you're concerned about the very faint little sort of tool marks, don't be, because once this goes into plastic wrap and whatever, it solves that problem, because it all becomes like the texture of the plastic wrap anyway. So I'll show this one too, just because I have 2 of them out. And again, just let the tool do the work. Be gentle about it. See, you don't want to pull too hard, because it'll pull up. You want to go sort of in a way that doesn't cause like pooled areas to want to pull up like a plug. So just gently let the tool do the work, scrape it along, and in no time at all you'll have a finished piece. I'm really sorry about those shadows. I only have one light in here, and it's to my right. So sometimes they drip down the side, and it's actually the easiest way to do that is just to push it off with a fingernail. It comes off right away, because there's no alcohol there to make it stick to itself. So it just comes off real easy. Like I said, the eyes, you gotta be gentle with the eyes and fangs. Sometimes I find it easy to split the eyes or the fangs down the middle so that you're not hooking it from the back. And just keep going until you get down to the shape that you want. That's it. And that's the whole thing. Now, the reason why I have these moons out here, these were some of the moons that I poured yesterday, is to show you these have been charging just under ordinary kitchen light. I guess that's a compact fluorescent. Just charging normally like you would with any other light. I check them under a black light because it's the fastest way to do it, but just for the interest of transparency, I'm going to go turn off the light and you'll see what happens. Okay, so in order to show you these, there's not enough light if I turn the light off to show you. The camera won't pick up the glow without... The camera won't pick up the glow if I turn the light out. It's just not sensitive enough to see it, but they do glow, and I'm going to show you that with a black light. Now, remember, there is no... there's very, very little white in these. It's only a tiny amount, so this is not glowing because of any sort of white pigment in any of the soap. This is glowing because of that glow powder. And under regular light, they glow more softly. They don't glow quite as brightly as this, but they will glow throughout the life of the bar. This glow powder has no like sort of time limit on it, so as you use the bar, they will continue to glow. You can see this is like the remnants of the the shavings that I pulled off, and they're glowing too. But you can see the piping on the wings and the eyes and the little fangs, they will glow, and the moons will glow quite brightly. And even if you use just a regular light, they will glow. You'll walk away from your bathroom and they will be glowing. So I just wanted to show everybody that before I continue with the next step, which should be after I finish all of the cemetery scenes and the little bats. Okay, I'm back now, and we are ready to actually start the pour of this soap. So, as I've mentioned before during the Atomic Eyes tutorial, the important part is that you have everything ready to do this without having to scramble for stuff. Because once it starts, you can't really stop it. So I'm going to spray each cavity with a bit of rubbing alcohol. Okay. And then I have some unscented ultra clear soap that I'm going to pour into each cavity just to create a layer on the bottom of each one. You don't want it to be too thick, but it does need to be thick enough so that it can hold the cemetery scene. So as soon as that's in, if there's any bubbles, just spray it with a little alcohol. And then you carefully take your cemetery scene, make sure it's facing the right way so the back side is facing you, and drop it into the mold. And once it's in there, and this one has a thing that got stuck to the back, there we go. Once it's in there, quickly move it into position and just kind of leave it there. Don't mess with it too much, because if you push it around too much and too far, it will start to bleed into the clear layer, and you don't want that. So you make sure that each one is, and just press it down and make sure that it's flush against the bottom of the mold, just like that. And at that point, spray it with some alcohol. And your next step is to place your bats. And again, the bats just need to be in, and they need to face the right direction. Because each of the tree things is different, you're going to have to find the best places to embed the bats. But you have to work relatively fast, because as soon as this starts to really thicken up, it's going to be difficult to do this. So as fast as you really can, reasonably, you want to get those bats in place. So this one is kind of big, so he's going to go up here, and this one is a lot smaller, and we can go in here. And sometimes they're going to want to flip upside down on you, which is kind of a pain in the ass, so just be aware that that is a thing that happens. And you get them in as quickly as you can, really, and leave them alone. And just, if there's any surface bubbles, just quickly spray them with alcohol. And at that point, again, you're working very fast. You want to get your moon and put your moon in and press it down so that it is definitely stuck in that layer of soap. I prefer to do it so that it's not going to smack the bats around too much, if that's possible. Sometimes it isn't, like there. But you want to press it down, because otherwise you run the risk of there being a bubble underneath where the moon is that you're trying to avoid. And at that point, you want to very quickly pour a little bit of soap around each moon, just your remaining clear, basically, to make sure that it is thoroughly embedded. And there was a big lump of not quite melted that just landed in that one. I'm going to go fish it out if I can. Yeah, okay. Just to make sure that it is firmly embedded into the mold, and that it's not going to shift around on you. At that point, you're going to walk away. I walk away and leave it alone and just let it set up. You don't want to do too much more with this because anything that you do is going to shift something out of position that you don't want to be out of position. So just let it sit there. It's gonna set up a little bit, and as soon as it has enough of a skin on it, breakthrough is not something that we're really concerned about in this particular soap. Breakthrough is not really a problem. If it happens, it's not a big deal in any way, but we want to make sure that it's set up enough that when something gets poured on top of it, the bats don't shift. That's really the key. So be back as soon as this sets up. Back now that this is hardened up just enough to be able to continue to work. Our continuing soap is melted in the other container that we used. That contains little bits of that black. It's perfectly okay. It's been fragranced and has vitamin E oil in it. I'm giving it a very good stir, as I've mentioned before. Otherwise, you will get hits of fragrance oil in your soap if it's not stirred enough. And then, at the very beginning of this, I have what they call liquid blue. It's a blue glycerin-based colorant. I'm just going to put this down. And for our first layer, I'm just going to put 2 drops of liquid blue. And give it a good stir. And you can see already that it's kind of a smoky blue. It looks darker on camera than it actually is. It's really not that dark. It's sort of like a twilight dusky blue. And I'm going to pour it in a layer that will cover the moon entirely from behind, and that's it. So again, covering the moon on the back, and that's it. Okay. I'm going to then spray the back with alcohol to get rid of any surface bubbles. And I'm going to add another 2 drops of liquid blue to the melted soap that remains. Obviously this is going to give it a darker color, more deeper intense blue. And I'm going to continue, but this time I'm only going to pour near the top of the mold, so that this part of the soap has a little bit darker blue than the bottom. Again, just like this, so that as you have like a gradient that goes up as you move up from the ground plane to the sky, the darkness gets to be more intense. Okay. And now once again I'm going to add another 2 drops of liquid blue. And I also have some leftover black that was little scraps that were left over from the previous endeavors here. And I'm going to just take like a handful of them. And I'm going to heat the soap again, and I'm going to create an even darker version. Okay, the soap is now out of the microwave, and it is like a midnight blue color. I'm going to add a mica called Snowflake Sparkle Mica. It's what I use to create the winter soaps. I'm only going to use a small amount because I don't want to make the soap pearlescent. I just want to add a little bit of sparkle, like stars, to that uppermost layer of soap. So just 1 small scoop. And now I'm going to go in, and again, just near the top, because it'll move on its own. It's going to spread however it wants to. So, but you want to concentrate that dark color near the upper edge and fill it all the way to the top. Again, pouring slowly in a steady stream until you get to the top. And you take the alcohol, which will break up any surface tension. And I'll show this one. You see, like it sort of breaks through and creates this beautiful sort of midnight blue cloud that goes from the top and seeps down towards the bottom. But because it's in layers, it will be perceived as a gradient. Like I said, once you get through with all of those little embedded pieces, this part is relatively simple by comparison. Get this last one. And then, I have a little bit extra. It's not a lot. I'm just going to save it. I'm going to save this little extra bit. I'll put it in a small container until I need to use it again. I don't want to mix it in with the next round of soap. So I just want to pour this sort of midnight blue color that remains into here so that I can start all over again with the same type of container that I started with when I do my next batch, because I do still have one more batch left to go. These just now have to sit until they are cool enough that I can move them. I'm not sure if you can see, yeah, I guess you can, how sparkly they are on camera. They are extremely sparkly. And as soon as they are ready to go into the other room, I'll pop them into the living room where it's much, much cooler, where the temperature is much cooler, and they will cool down in a few hours and be able to be unmolded. So we'll see you at the unmolding. Okay, everybody, a few hours have passed since the last time we filmed, and now it's time to unmold the soaps. They have already been stamped. I know that it's really difficult to see that in this light, but they have been stamped, and they've also been loosened, because that's a lot easier for me to do on a flat surface, and this is not exactly flat. So these will unmold pretty easily. That's because I've already initially loosened them up. Okay. So this one. So, I'm not entirely sure how well this is going to show up, but we'll give it a shot. So these are the four that I poured earlier, and they're all fine except for one small thing. This one, I'll bring it closer to the camera, hopefully it'll pick it up, has a bubble right by the side here on the moon. Now, most people won't care about this, like they won't notice, know, or care, but I just want to point out that I was trying to avoid that problem. Sometimes you just can't, because the moons are not completely flat. They have a slight curve to them, and the backs of the cemetery things are a slightly uneven surface, and sometimes you just can't avoid it. But I did try. But what I will show you is the fact that they will indeed glow under black light. And they will glow under regular light too. It's just that they're not going to have enough time to charge under regular light here. And actually, I'm not entirely sure that the camera's sensitive enough to pick it up. So I'm going to go and get a black light. The sun is coming up here, but the camera's not sensitive enough to really pick that up. So I'm just going to shine a black light on these. And you can see that they will glow quite brightly. They will, as I said, glow under regular, ordinary light as well. It's just that the camera's not sensitive enough to pick it up. but you can definitely see it. If I take the black light away, you can still see that they will continue to glow. It's just a matter of them charging. And since these just came out of the mold, they haven't had really any time to charge up and maintain their phosphorescence. So, but I love the little tree patterns in the moons that show there. So after I went off camera before, I actually poured the other 4. So I do have all 8 of these full-size bars done. The other 4 are still cooling. If you look at them from the side, you can see that there's like a clear layer, and then you've got like a sort of glittery midnight blue behind it, which is exactly what's supposed to happen. None of the bats flipped around, which was great. In the second batch that I poured, there's a danger of one of the bats flipping upside down, which was kind of a problem. But we'll see how that turns out. But other than that one little bubble, these are all perfect, and they smell great. People really love the scent of All Hallows Eve anyway. I'm very lucky that All Hallows Eve is really just one oil. Sometimes they're very complicated, but this is a pretty simple scent. So I hope this was informative and whatever. These will be available for sale on the website on the 1st of October, and they will be a charity thing for Bat World. But if you happen to be coming to Murder of Crows on the 15th and 16th of September, you can get them in person, and they will be there waiting for you. Okay, see you next time.